I have my 2 fabric layers and my 3 regular layers of silicone done. What I want to do now is I want to put a couple registration keys, and they really are keys because they kind of lock into the plaster part of the mold I'm going to do and help hold this thing, help it keep its shape inside of the mold. I have brown silicone caulk, and I'm just going to do a line of caulking. Get this guy flowing here. There we go. I'm going to do a line of caulking right down the center of this. And I want it to be a nice thick bead. I want it to be a nice thick bead of silicone because I have to shape it later. I have my brown bead of caulk down. I'm going to wet my fingers a little bit. And I am going to drag this out a little bit just to get rid of the roundness of that bead of caulk. If it were round, it could create a mold lock. If it were round, it could create a mold lock with the plaster. I don't want that. So I'm feathering the bottom of this bead I put down. I'm feathering the bottom of it right into the mold. And just wet fingertips is going to keep the silicone from sticking. I've done one straight down the center. I'm now going to do just a couple more registration marks. I'll do one line this way and one line this way. And that should really help this lock into the plaster part of the mold and keep it on track. Wet fingers. Pushing down the edges and feathering out this. So now it's much more like a ridge than a tube sitting on top of there. And I want that ridge-like effect. Just using my 2 fingers to run up and down that bead to smooth those out a little bit. Okay, like all good things in life, I must wait for that to dry. So this is my mold, and just so you can see what it looks like from above with key in place. I have my registration keys here in the clear silicone. I have my silicone mold. One of the first things that I need to do, this is hot because I just got it off the stove in order to melt the wax, is I'm using Johnson's paste wax over this whole silicone mold in order to release it. I don't want the plaster to stick to the silicone. I want them to be 2 separate pieces, one that fits inside of the other. I'm just going to coat this whole thing. I'm really not worried about the silicone sticking to the plaster. What I'm worried about is any fabric that was showing. I don't want it to lock into that cheesecloth the same way the silicone did. So I want a barrier between those two. I have a bowl of pretty warm water that I'm going to mix up some plaster in for my plaster mother mold. I have my big lumps out of the bowl. I'm shaking it, tapping against the table to get any air bubbles out. I didn't want any air bubbles in the silicone. I don't want any in the plaster either. I have some pieces of burlap that I have here. Pieces about that big are good. I'm not going for super detail. I don't need every nook and cranny. I do want to get it good and plastered on there. I'm dipping it in like I'm making chicken fried steak. Dip it in, mash it down. Grab another piece. You want to make sure it works into the weave of the burlap, otherwise it's not adding any strength. And keep it wet. Keep it wet on here. Don't worry about wringing it out and getting too much out of it. Ordinarily, you wouldn't do a fabric layer as your first layer of a mold, of a plaster mold, because it's not going to catch as much detail and you're more likely to have air bubbles. But I'm not worried about it. The silicone has my detail. This is really just backing up the silicone. I don't want any air bubbles though, so I'm trying to work them out. Let this harden a little bit more. Clean my tool off a bit. It's time to demold this guy here. I can get under the plaster, I think, right here. See if I can lift it off. Alright, excellent. I have gotten everything up in one shot. Alright, I have my clay here, which is part of the sculpture. I'm pulling it out of the way. Why clean it out twice? I'm going to bring my garbage can over here. go. You got to break that vacuum seal. Head forms out. And now it's just a matter of peeling out clay. This is nothing like cleaning out a plaster mold. So much simpler. Alright, with that, my mold is fairly clean. I'm going to remove the silicone just by peeling it out. So I want to make sure that I can peel it out when the time comes when it's got a resin cast in it. There is our silicone mold. There's my wax just flaking off of it like crazy. Not worried about that. Don't have to clean off that side because this is my business end. I'm going to go ahead and put it back in here. Make sure my registration marks line up. And because I flatten the end, it sits flat, I'm going to prep for casting. Okay, I have my mold. I've gathered all my materials ahead of time. I'm going to hit my mold with a little bit of mold release. You can get your mold release at a lot of different places. You could just use Johnson's paste wax if you wanted to. It's honestly not that necessary for a silicone mold for you to use mold release, but you will get a few more pulls out of it if you use mold release. Hitting the edge also, healthy coat. Bitty Mold Supply sells release, and I love those guys. I have mixing tubs. If you buy mixing tubs from a normal place, like a Home Depot, these lines aren't actual. They won't give you real good readings. Get your mixing cups from someplace like Bitty Mold Supply. Give them a lot of plugs. They're local to me, and they're great guys. My real pulls will probably be in poly 1512 liquid plastic. But moving on to this one. Read the instructions. If it says shake it or mix it, do that. I could also use fiberglass for this. I could do a mask out of plaster if I wanted to. Pour this where it's nice and flat. And I'm going to thicken part B with some polyfiber. Alright, which is it's just a thickener. It really adds no properties to it whatsoever. Because I don't want it to run everywhere. I want a pretty thick paste that I can smooth out inside this mold. I will show you guys on subsequent layers here what I'm doing. Right now I just have to get this in the mold. I have used this craft paper to push down on the inside of the mask. So, and this is, again, this is not a usable piece. I haven't taken my time. I haven't put any fabric in here at all. This is just to show you guys how this works and to pull something from it really quick. Watch my sconce tutorial, the fiberglass sconce tutorial, and that'll show you how to do a good pour up. That happens to be fiberglass, but it's really the same method for all of those. I'm going to let this sit for a bit. This stuff demolds in half an hour, so I'll come back to this and pull it and show you guys what it looks like. It's been about 15-20 minutes. I want to remove the silicone mold from the plaster mold. That was easy. Put it off to the side, but not too far away. And I want to gently separate the silicone from the plastic. Okay, very good. Flip my piece back right side out. Put it back in the mold. There's my finished piece. Got the eyes nice and thin, like I wanted, so they pop out. Should be able to do inside the mouth pretty much the same way. You can see here that I've got a good aged look. I've got some pox in it, which is what I want. I'm rubbing off some of the paint up here a little bit because I did this before it was all the way dry. And I'm really going to distress the heck out of this. And I'll probably break them a couple ways and maybe wire them back together. Just make these look really industrial. They're going to have leather straps that hold them on. And I just want these to be super creepy and baby-like at the same time. So I think I'm on the right path.